Hey guys, today we have a very special guest. His name is Stewart Flaherty. He's an assistant coach at Dartmouth University in the Ivy League, and he's going to share with us a lot of things about how to play in college. And Stewart, welcome.
Thanks. Good to see you, Buford.
It's such an honor to have you here. And let's go ahead and get started. First question I have is, what are the most important characteristics that you look for in a prospective player?
Yeah, that's usually the first question.
Yes.
And if I'm going to give you the most important, it's probably not an answer you hear common, but I could give you the list of soccer traits and athletic traits that everybody has heard before. But more important, what we look for is, we're starting to see two types of players in soccer. And it's in terms of how they approach entering a team. There's a lot of players nowadays, and it is a red flag that they've been taught a certain way to play, and they have a preferred way to do things. And part of their recruiting is they will be very, very aggressive telling you how they want to do things. And while they're not trying to make that a red flag, we're trying to build a team here at Dartmouth, a team that was here and successful before them, a team that will be here and successful after them. So the most appealing thing when we start to deal with these top end of players who have the ability to play here is them coming with the mindset to learn, because it's not a coherent atmosphere to build a team and to educate players when players are sat trying to educate you on how things should be done. And it is certainly a common thing nowadays. We have certain values and certain principles of play that we're going to do at Dartmouth regardless of the personnel, and we'll be switching the personnel doing it before we switch how we do things to suit a player. And that is, that's not always the way in club soccer. It's not always the way when you're developing players, but the fact is we are trying to build a team. We are trying to improve every single player on the roster. We are trying to get people to their goals of pro soccer and get to our team goals of Ivy League championships and NCAA tournaments. And you simply don't do that trying to please 28 different teenagers. You do it by setting structure in place and having players coming with a desire to learn how to do things here and to do them very well, and then to earn the leadership spot by being a living, breathing example of what the coaches are trying to put across. So I would say if we see that characteristic in a player and we see the ability to perform, that's going to put them right at the top of any recruitment pack we have.
Okay, that's great stuff there. Switching a little bit, talking about the prospects. If a prospect is interested in playing for you at Dartmouth, what can he include in his initial contact with you, which most likely be via email, that will catch your eye? Is there anything specific?
I'll be honest, it's tough to catch someone's eye in an email. There's just so many. And some, you see some kids try so hard and you almost feel bad that you don't have time to read through this entire email that they've written, and bless the kid, probably rewritten too, right? Yes. But if you want to stand out, the video should be in there. If there's not a video in the email, I don't know that you can write an email well enough to stand out and be memorable in that shuffle without a video. If the video is in there, that's going to be the primary impression that they carry around in terms of remembering you. Around the video, make it substance, don't make it fluff. There are certain things that are fine to be found out down the line in the recruitment process. You don't have to throw absolutely everything out there in the opening email. But things they're going to want to know, graduation year is vital. I'd even put that in the title. GPA, class rank, test scores, if you're doing honors and APs classes, maybe how many, all that academic information, and then where you play. What club do you play at and what's your schedule? And if you want a reason to make repeated contact with coaches without being, I won't say annoying, but without just being noise, I would send out your preseason league schedule with an introduction. And then every time you're playing a game in a certain location, a road location, I'd probably email the schools all around that location. And then every time you play at a showcase event and showcase tournament, I would send the schedule to that tournament And you're going to see over a 6 to 12 month period which schools are replying, which schools are writing to you after the games, which is a huge indicator of interest, and which schools are ignoring you. And I'm a big believer, rather than start to obsess over only one or two schools if they are ignoring you, keep all your doors open and pay close attention to who is being responsive and who's speaking to you, because that's kind of the market that you should go play in. Where I think a lot of people get caught up is they will come to somebody like me or somebody who's played college or someone with what they see as some knowledge and say, what division should my kid play? Division 1, Division 2, or Division 3? To ask one person's opinion is the wrong way to do it, even if it's a qualified opinion. You know, here's the level you should be playing at. If you consistently play and email coaches for a year and you get D1 responses, then there's your market. If you do that for a year and every single D1 coach is ignoring you, and you start to hear from D3 schools and D2 schools, you have to pay attention to that. You know, and when you present it to people in this way, they tend to get less offended and the pride doesn't get involved as much because, you know, when you say what level should he play, if you're honest, you want to hear D1. And if you don't hear D1, you're not going to like it. But just pay attention to reality. Who's replying to your emails, which coaches are calling, and which coaches are just, you know, sending you maybe a copy and paste reply, and which coaches are ignoring you completely. And that's going to dictate the market as far as where you're going to go as a player. And even if they're wrong, if all 200 plus male D1 college programs are wrong when they're ignoring you, they're still ignoring you. Yes. And it's still going to be a real tough situation for you. So unless you're okay with the reality of going to a school and not playing on the varsity soccer team, which many are, and there's no reason you shouldn't be at some great schools, then you have to pay attention to the responses you get back, not just what you want to happen.
All right. Now you mentioned that you have to have a video. So what are you looking for in that player's highlight video?
Goes by position, right? But I guess to summarize it, I want to see what you're good at. You know, a lot of kids will try and show every single skill in the game when, frankly, they'd have been better off, you know, showing off their good things. You know, no one's going to sign you off a highlight video anyway. But an example I'll give you is I've seen videos where, you know, the kid's got some real dribbling speed, got some real good crossing ability, and is a winger. You know, the kid can't really defend, to be honest with you, or at least it's going to need some work over 4 years. And the video I'm thinking of, and it sticks out in my head, is the first thing in the video was a section on heading, which he wasn't good at. Then there was a section on tackling, which he wasn't good at. And then there was a section on dribbling, and he's lucky I stuck with it because he was good at that. And then there was passing, and then there was crossing. And the thing he was best at, and the only thing that separated him, was at the end of the video. Now, he caught me on a day I was going through videos, but a lot of coaches would have turned it off by then. So yes. This isn't a movie where you kind of produce it, take us through that journey, and then climax at the end and show us what we want to see. Front load every good clip and every quality you have at the front of that video in case somebody just plays it for the first 60 to 90 seconds. Make sure if they do that, they've seen your best players. And as far as what they are, I don't know, man. You know, maybe you're a centre-back who's dominant in the air. Maybe you're a midfielder who's really good at passing the ball. Maybe you're a striker who's a good finisher. Whatever it is you're good at, put it at the front of that video, put it repeatedly and emphasize it.
Great advice.
Yeah. I think one thing to mention on this when it comes to emails and videos is all this is saying hello. You know, if this was the dating world, this is just a first date. That's it, right? Yes. And people are so anxious to get absolutely everything done in this interaction. It's never going to happen, man. You know, just, you know, like send the email out with the information needed, send the video out with your strengths in, and then you're going to have to be patient. And if it's going to happen for you, now it's going to be a 3, 6, 9 month process or longer of multiple different steps. And there's a lot of anxiety in the recruiting world, and there really doesn't need to be, man. There doesn't need to be. And the reason it's important you don't do it is if you start to give vibes off that you're really anxious about it and you're really worried about it, it means a lot to you. you start to run risk of coaches thinking, well, he's probably not good enough to play here. You know, it doesn't seem like he believes in himself enough that he will play here. He seems kind of desperate, needs a phone call every 3 weeks to reassure him how good he is, you know, needs this to happen as quick as he possibly can. Is that because we're his only option? You know, these are the things you start to give off if you're too anxious about it and too almost needy with the communication. Because things take time, they do.
Yes, great information. Now let's switch gears a little bit. You coach in the Ivy League, and there's some special things about it. One of the things is the academic index. You know, a lot of people aren't familiar with it. A lot of people are, but have misconceptions. Could you explain a little bit about how the academic index works?
Yeah. So the academic index is it's a way to ensure that Ivy League teams bring in students who would graduate. I think that's a fair way to put it. You know, there's a perception out there that there's athletes walking around Ivy League schools that don't belong there and are only there because they play sports. And it's wrong, you know, and people, it's one of those things where people say it enough, then it starts to get some level of, you know, perceived truth. It's absolutely incorrect and blatantly false. You know, what the academic index is they, I think it's the school has an average academic index. And if you are one standard deviation or more below that index, you are now a case that the dean of admission to your school has to justify to the rest of the league as to why you were admitted. Right? Now, when we think about why people do that, you're talking about millionaires and billionaires who could maybe build facilities that don't exist. You know, you're probably talking about sons and daughters of presidents. The perception that an Ivy League dean of admission would do that so his soccer team could win 10 games instead of 7 or 13 games instead of 9 is just so far removed from reality. I couldn't even explain to you. It's nonsense. So if you are not within one standard deviation of a school's academic index, it's not going to happen for you, you know, and it's a shame, but it is what it is. Now, if you are in that, within that standard deviation, now you can be a candidate for athletic support. And how they would view your athletic ability is the same as if you were a great artist, or as if you were a great musician, or you were an author, or you had some kind of extracurricular activity that was way above and beyond the average and contributed something to the student body. That's how they view a high-level soccer player. That's how they view high-level musicians, high-level artists. You know, I remember working in the NESCAC before, and one kid's admission case was boosted by the fact that she'd hiked to the top peak in all 50 states. And that was her thing, and she was going to start an outdoor club on the school, and that kind of was perceived as something that would add to the student body. So that's how athletic support works. Now, if we have to bring in a certain average, you know, and I'm just throwing out, this number is going to be nowhere near reality. I'm going to say 400, which is probably double the school's AI, but I'm going to say it so nobody can say Dartmouth said insert number here. And if we brought in a player who was 395, to get back to the average, we now have to sign a player who's 405. That means that's two different players. You know, if you're a player who we think might take 4 years to develop, but will be a good player on the team, become an Ivy League starter over 4 years and work on some weaknesses, you might get signed at 405. Now, if you were a 390 or a 395, you probably need to be a player that we think's an all-league candidate. You probably need to be a player that we think can lift the entire group. You need to be a player that's so good that we think 2 years into your career, not that you're starting, but you're so good that the next young kid behind you is a better player just for having you there as an example. So that's, you know, when people ask that question, right, can he get in? That's not the question. You know, that's like signing for a pro team and saying, can I play for you? And then, well, how much are you asking for? You asking for 2 million a year, or are you asking for 7 million a year? So where your academic index number falls will dictate the lens that you are looked at through. You know, it's not necessarily, is he good enough to play here or not? It's if he's below the academic index, which again, at Dartmouth, Buford, that's a very, very smart kid. But if he's below and we now have to sign the rest of the class to bring a number back to where it needs to be, then he probably doesn't get looked at through the same recruiting lens as somebody who was who has, above the academic index. So all the kids listening to this, when your mom and dad tell you that your test scores matter, when your mom and dad tell you that you need high grades, it's true. A, because if you don't have them, you're not even in the conversation. But B, at any school, if you have high grades, you might get looked at through a better lens, and there might be doors open for you that aren't open if you're struggling. Because there's, rightly or wrongly, all kinds of perceptions that come with good academic performance, discipline, a kid who can stick at a task, intelligence, the ability to figure something out and solve problems. All these things are perceived with kids who are doing well in school.
Okay, well, that's a great explanation. And just a little bit of follow-up. So, let's say a kid wants to play soccer in the Ivy League, or, at Dartmouth or at one of the other Ivy League schools.
Yeah.
So should they have all their test scores and everything in before they contact you as a coach?
No, I wouldn't say necessarily before they contact us. But I mean, if you are a player that we like as a coach, you got to understand all that means when we like you is we're going to go watch you play live. It's probably, before we go watch you play live, we're going to want to have a rough idea. Now, right now, especially for the last year, we've been operating without test scores, right? So many SATs have been cancelled. So many standardized tests have been cancelled. But it's also not uncommon that we would hear from a kid and we would talk to a kid, and that kid doesn't have test scores yet. If he has a high GPA, that's fine for now. Then if we go watch him play and we're really like, okay, now this is a kid that we're really thinking about walking down the line with here, now we need the test scores, because that academic index is a calculation. It's kind of like that NFL QB rating, right? A high number's good, but you don't know exactly how they calculate it. But it's a calculation of GPA, academic rigor, class rank, and test scores. And it just doesn't work without test scores. You're completely guessing without test scores.
Gotcha. Okay, now we're going to get into a little thorny subject with coaches and parents. And when is it acceptable from your viewpoint as a coach for the parents to get involved in the recruiting process? I know the initial process should all be
unacceptable. It's never unacceptable. It's never unacceptable. One of the reasons we talk right now, Buford, is you're a soccer parent, and I like how you present things. I like your passion for the game, and I like the story you've told about your son. It is never acceptable, but there's different types of interaction. There just is, man. And if a parent does all the speaking for the kid, does that mean we don't want to deal with our parents? I mean, maybe, but the bigger problem is we're not impressed with the kid.
Yes.
We're trying to make assumptions on how we can deal with a kid here. And, I don't care how good a kid is, right? And I've learned this over more than a decade in college. If you cannot connect and build a relationship with a kid, they are not going to reach their potential in 4 years. And the vast majority of the time, they're not even going to help your team at all. So we need to start figuring out during the recruiting process, can I connect with this kid? Does this kid listen? Every soccer player has opinions. Every good soccer player has confidence. But are we able to cut through that and have him buy into a group environment? And can we get to the point, even if it's not today, where the goals of the Dartmouth College soccer program take forefront above his individual agenda? How do we find that out talking to his mom or dad? Because if his mom or dad tells me that they think he can do that, I know that you think that. But trust me, every bad locker room kid in the USA, every kid who's not listening to his coach, every kid who's having a bad experience, their parents thought it would go fine too. I'd call that cynical, but that's what it is. So we don't want to form opinions of how we get on with your son through interactions with you. Does that mean you can't be involved? Absolutely not. Why would you say that? But it does mean that if you sat talking to a coach and your son's asked a question, then let him answer the question. And if you're so anxious that you're worried that his answer will ruin it and only your answer will be good enough, start asking yourself why that is, man. Because that doesn't seem healthy to me. Part of coaching soccer at Dartmouth and what we pride ourselves on is that for the top percentage of our players, and we've had 5 draft picks in the last 4 years, which we're very proud of, but can go on and play pro soccer in any locker room, any system, any coach, any league. We want to set them up to go and succeed in any locker room, because if we're the reason that they succeed, a lot of youth coaches make this error. They're playing well because of us, and now that they go on and now they fail because they weren't ready, and we just tell ourselves, well, they played well for us. You know, it must be them. It's not our problem. It's A, delusional, and B, you've not done your job. If you are developing a player for pro soccer, that means you're developing them to go succeed in pro soccer without you. My opinion of parenting, you should be developing your son or daughter to go succeed in college without you. And if you feel like you have to be involved and you have to make all these things easier for them, I just don't believe that you're developing strength and resilience in the way that you could be. My opinion. I've done a lot of reading on this, and a great book to read, because 10 years now of NESCAC and Ivy League, I deal with a certain kind of kid a lot. There's a book called The Price of Privilege about emotional development in teenagers, and it's a very worthwhile read for every parent, I would say, and every coach.
All right. Well, I'll have to check that book out.
Yeah.
All right. Now, of course, we all know, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Hopefully it's winding down soon. But, how has COVID impacted your program, and not just the obvious? I mean, obviously not playing. Ivy League decided not to play at all this year, but how does it affect like future roster size and things of that nature?
So for us, it's not affecting future roster size. We're very, very lucky. We're an Ivy League school. We're a top tier sport at Dartmouth, and we're very fortunate in that aspect. Some schools, they're losing players, they're cutting rosters. It's a shame. Some programs are getting cut. So that's not going to change for us. And the players that were graduating out of Dartmouth, they're not coming back. They're going to go graduate, and this is the fortunate position of having an Ivy League degree and some of the opportunities. A lot of high school seniors right now will be thinking, well, if I was there, I'd come back for a fifth year. Well, you don't have a potential six-figure job that you could walk into in the next month or two, because that is the reality looking at a lot of Ivy League students. So we don't have the dynamic a lot of schools had, where those kids are just going to automatically come back for that one more year. We did have one player drafted in the MLS. He maybe would have been one who came back, but he's not coming back now.
Yes.
So, yeah, it hasn't affected us. I don't think that would be the answer universally if you talk to a lot of D1 coaches, but the recruiting process, it's kind of like left a hole in the middle, right? Because our recruiting process for the class of 22 would have been fall and winter communication and video, starting in winter and ending in May. We'd be at tournaments, showcases, league games in the region. We'd watch a lot of soccer live. And during that 5 or 6 month period, we got a depth chart that would go up and down. Grades fluctuating would send kids up and down the depth chart in their position. Test scores would, maybe eliminate some and move some up and down. And then every time we watch people live, then you always feel better. Watching a kid play once and watching a kid play 5 times is very, very different things. And if I'm an assistant coach, I have to make cases to our head coach, Bo, about the player.
Yes.
If I have seen a kid play once and Bo starts pushing back, I'm not going to push that strong, because I've seen him once. I could have seen him have the best game of his life. Could have seen him have the worst game of his life. This is the insecurity you feel when you've watched one kid. So
Yes.
having that December to May, we're able to see kids 3, 4, 5 times, and you start to really cement your opinion. You've got a top game, you've got a bad game, you've got 2 or 3 middle games, and you got a pretty solid belief in yourself when it comes to certain kids. That's gone now, to be honest with you. We're watching full games on video, which is one thing, but we're now going to have a window between June 30th and August 2nd, where we're going to run 12 ID events, starting in Maine and heading all the way down to Florida, with 10 stops in between. And those days are going to be real big decision days, to be honest with you, because the plan is to have probably 3 to 5 top prospects in each position. And that's good. Instead of watching multiple games live in the spring, that's kind of be the window where we see them go head to head, maybe against each other. And the beauty of these events is we could sort of manipulate the drills to see what we want to see that day. And what I'm talking about there is I've been to watch a centre back play, and I've watched half a game at the tournament. I've left, his team's been 3-0 up, and he's not been under a lot of pressure. Now, that kid's done nothing wrong.
Yes.
But you're still left with the question, what would it look like if he had to defend five crosses that half? What would it look like if he was against a faster forward? Now, the beauty of ID events is if we think that, then we take the best centre-back and we put him on the worst team, and we put him under some pressure. Or we put him in a drill where he's going to place 40 crosses in 10, 15 minutes. Or if we've got a striker, instead of having him watch around and take 2 or 3 chances in half a game, we're going to have quick fire shooting drills. We're going to have half field drills. So the ability to manipulate during those events and see what we want to see is going to be more important than it's ever been, to be honest with you, because by the end of the last year, that last event, I would say we probably filled the class within 2 to 4 weeks of that sort of whatever you want to call it, tour, road swing, whatever it is. After that's ended, then that's probably when we're going to make all our decisions.
Okay, so if there's a 22 player that wants to play for Dartmouth, he needs to check out those dates.
Yes, but don't wait until those dates. I'll just go there. Let's hear from you before then. Let's see your highlight video before then. If you've got full game tape, whatever the most recent you have, that depends on what state you live in right now. Send us that then. But yeah, yes. those dates are going to be pretty big, and there's a real cool story, actually. I don't know that I'm allowed to name current student athletes. I don't know if there's a compliance rule with that, so I'm not going to tell you his name. But there is a player on our team from the West Coast, and he was in the mix. He had good grades. He was a good little player, and he was kind of in the mix. And he came to our residential camp 2 years ago. And this isn't a residential camp advert because we don't have one this summer. But he came, and after those 4 days, we were convinced and we signed off on him. And then we were comfortable saying no to 3 or 4 other guys. And as a freshman, he scored the winning goal in one of our Ivy League games, which was really cool, to be honest with you.
Yes.
And that motivates you a lot more because sometimes, the logistics and the sales and the structure you have to put around camp can be not as exciting as the league season. But when you get stories like that and when things like that come from the camp, it certainly motivates you a bit more.
All right. Now, final question is, what one piece of advice would you give a 22 or 23 player wanting to play soccer in the Ivy League as conditions are now? What would you have them do?
Conditions are now. I would say, obviously, academically, I don't even need to say that. Like even if you, here's an interesting thing. Even if you have good grades, in your freshman, sophomore, junior years, if you dip off as a senior, that can hurt you in the Ivy League admissions process, whether it's senioritis, whatever it is, or it's not a great thing to have your grades moving in the wrong direction. It shows that maybe, and I get it, you're a high school senior, you're busy, you've got a lot of distractions, this and that. Well, trust me, that gets bigger, not smaller in college, that element of your life. So you just need to be able to multitask. Yes. So make sure that your grades are holding or improving if you want to get into an Ivy League school, that's true for athletes and it's true for non-athletes. And I know there's a perception, well, I know that's the case for the rest of them, but I'm a soccer player, so it doesn't count for me, A, that's a complete myth, completely incorrect. And B, this is life advice. Don't cut a corner just because you think you can, because a lot of kids fall down on that. You hear horror stories, you hear committed players who, tank the second term of their senior year and it cost them 4 years at an Ivy League school. Or kids cut a corner on their admission essay and now they're in jeopardy and they're not admitted into the school, and there's this certain dynamic with, it feels good and it feels cool that if you have to do less than the next guy, you can still succeed. That's not a good. It's not a good thing. It's not a good trait. It's not healthy. And if you are fortunate enough to get yourself in an Ivy League environment, even doing that, it will cost you when you get there, and you will fail, because consistent application and hard work is the only way to succeed in an Ivy League environment. And in fact, here's the one bit of advice. I've rambled a bit, but here's one bit of advice. Stop thinking and obsessing about getting into a school and start living and studying and playing in a way that means you would succeed when you've got there.
That is awesome advice. And there's a 16-year-old that will hear that very shortly.
Is he going to listen?
Probably not. But he'll hear it nonetheless.
Yeah.
All right. And Stewart, before I let you go, I noticed on Facebook you have a group or a page where you talk about soccer tactics. And,
yes, I do.
You know, for me as a parent who didn't grow up in the game, I learned something from every post you have. So I'd love to share it with the group, and maybe they could check it out, because I know.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's actually a side project that fell my way through a connection in North Carolina, actually, in Charlotte, Ali Ben. And we run two websites, retrofootballanalysis.com and modernfootballanalysis.com. And the idea is to cover games. But I'm glad you said what you said, because the idea is that if someone is reading it, you know, maybe they come away picking up one or two things that they never thought of before. Maybe they look at something differently. It doesn't just explain the game. It kind of gives you a little bit of insight into how we look at it that opens your mind. And the inspiration for that came, for both me and Ali, came from the NFL. Because when I watch the NFL, you know, my dad was a big American football guy. And, you know, people like John Madden and people like Ron Jaworski and people like John Gruden and now Tony Romo, these guys teach you about American football. They do. Yes. They teach you about defensive coverages. They teach you what to look for, and they make you think of concepts that sometimes apply in soccer, to be honest with you, you know. And soccer doesn't do that as well, I don't feel. I feel like soccer is more descriptive, and I feel like soccer can be more narrative driven. And I don't believe there's a lot of soccer coverage around on the level that you can learn a little bit about the game at the same time as you read. So that's what we're trying to do with this.
Well, it is working, because, like I say, I learned something from every post, and something that I've never even thought of.
Appreciate it.
All right. Well,
Can I just add one thing, Buford?
Sure.
If anyone has interest in the satellite events for Dartmouth, it's socceracademics.com is the website. And we are right now in the process of finalizing facilities. So starting tomorrow, you should start to see the locations and the times come up. And there'll be events in Maine, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. So we're covering this entire coast. And we're even going out to Arizona.
Okay, well, and it's socceracademics.com.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is some great information, and who knows, maybe you'll get a couple of prospects from the group.
That's what we're hoping for. One that scores a winning goal in an Ivy League game one day. Then we can do it.
Yes. All right. Well, Stewart, it's been an honor and a pleasure to have you. You've shared some great information, and I know everyone will be appreciative, and we really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us. I know you had to check and make sure it was okay with your school, and I appreciate you going through that extra effort.
All right. No problem. Always a pleasure to talk to you, Buford.
All right. Well, Stewart, we hope to talk to you again soon, and good luck next year in your season when you finally get to play.
Hey, thanks.
Bye-bye.